I'm delighted to be in Belfast city centre to meet with Thomas Byrne, who's Director of Energy Strategy for the Department for Economy. And Thomas is joining us for the first episode of the Phoenix Meet series. And the series is really designed to engage with stakeholders and personnel who are charging the decarbonisation agenda forward in Northern Ireland. And we want to talk to Thomas today to find out what the options paper and the energy strategy roadmap means for you and for consumers and for wider society, and the opportunities that exist to deliver net carbon zero solutions in Northern Ireland. Thomas, thank you very much for joining us in the first of a series of Phoenix Meets discussions, which is all about us engaging with organisations and businesses around the subject of decarbonisation. And you are, of course, the Director for Energy Strategy in the Department for Economy. And you've been busy over the last year, whilst we've had our lockdown and our challenges locally. The department has very much pushed on with moving the decarbonisation agenda forward, and indeed published the options paper at the end of March. Before we explore some of the themes across the paper, how do you go about putting a document like that together that spans across so many different sectors and stakeholders?
Well, Jonathan, firstly, thanks very much for having me along here today to say a few words about the energy strategy. As you say, really proud to have the energy strategy options consultation published there at the end of March. It's a key milestone in delivering a new energy strategy for Northern Ireland. So I think you're right. Something like an energy strategy, there are a lot of stakeholders that sort of are interested in it and want to be involved. And I think our approach through that has been very much about giving them the opportunity to contribute. And I think that's a really important part of it. Firstly, we launched a call for evidence back in December 2019, and we got 161 responses to that, which was a fantastic response to a consultation on energy. And the really positive thing for me from that was that over half of them didn't come from the energy industry. And I think that's what this energy strategy is about. It's not just about the energy industry, it's about society more broadly. So that gave everyone the opportunity to help to provide evidence and shape what the starting point for some of those policies might be. And then over the past year or so, in the run-up to the consultation, we've taken forward very much a collaborative work programme. We've tried to bring a number of those stakeholders into the development process. We set up 5 working groups, invited some key representatives to be part of that work, and indeed I've done my best to kind of go out there and engage and speak to people from all various different sectors and various different sort of stakeholder groups to get their buy-in to it. And of course this consultation is a really important part of that as well. This is the chance for everyone, no matter where you're from, to help to shape the energy policies that are in a new strategy. So really looking forward to getting the responses to that, out and about trying to build as much awareness of that as possible. And I think we want that sort of joined up collaborative approach to be not just for the strategy, but actually how we take forward energy in the future as well, and bringing together all the parties to deliver on decarbonisation in the future.
And in terms of the last strategy was back in 2010, and the world when it comes to energy and climate change seems to have just changed hugely in that 10 or 11 years. In the understanding and the engagement that you've had over the last number of months, what do you think specifically have been the drivers for this now wider society thirst for decarbonisation and moving to net carbon zero? What's driving that? Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the awareness of climate change, first and foremost, actually has really driven the change in environment. For example, from the last energy strategy we would have produced, I think there's a much greater awareness of climate change, of the need to take action now. This isn't a problem for future generations and future societies. It's something we need to start tackling now. And that really sets the strategic driver, I guess, for a new energy strategy and what we're doing here. I also think that COVID as well actually has changed the landscape a bit too. I think both in terms of the fact that people can see there is a different way of living our lives. We don't need to travel everywhere in vehicles. We can work from home. We can shop local. Those are all things that actually will be really important as part of a decarbonised future. But also the economic side of it as well, and the economic opportunities from COVID, the chance to rebuild the economy in a slightly different way, a more sustainable economy, and one that's based around low carbon solutions. So I think, climate change and COVID have been two really important drivers of the landscape for this energy strategy as well. I think one thing I would say is that the core fundamentals of what people need from energy hasn't changed. They need secure, reliable energy, and they need it to be affordable. So I think we need to maintain the focus on that, but then also build in these kind of new priorities that have come along then over recent years.
And it's interesting you talked about the level of engagement and the 161 responses. I feel like I've spent the last year on Zoom platforms. There must have been some upside of that in terms of the continued engagement and the ability to keep this conversation alive over the last year. Do you think in an odd sort of way the Zoom platforms actually lend themselves quite well to wider stakeholder engagement?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, as I mentioned, I've really done my best to kind of get out there and promote the work we're doing in energy strategy and give the people the opportunity to feed into it. And I think what it probably has done is allow people who wouldn't necessarily be able to set aside time or travel to be involved in something or to participate in something, to join a call, to log into something, to go to a conference that they wouldn't otherwise have been able to travel to, and to learn about things they wouldn't otherwise have done. So I think there have been benefits to it from that perspective. However, I think we're all looking forward to kind of getting back and actually, engaging with people, meeting people, talking with people about things. So I think what it has done is when we think about the future, that we can learn some of the benefits we've been able to have from this about technology, but then also blend that with the personal relationships and that kind of thing as well.
Imagine as an industry, as an organisation ourselves who are involved in shaping the roadmap for decarbonisation, imagine one of the most challenging aspects for you is the fact that you're trying to look ahead 30 years in terms of not having full sight of the twists and turns of innovation and new technologies and new consumer behaviours that will ultimately apply. But how do we ensure in Northern Ireland that that final goal of net carbon zero by 2050, which looks like such a challenge, how do we ensure that we don't get overawed by that and actually get on now with the no regrets, the low regret opportunities that are on our doorstep?
I mean, you're absolutely right. I think, Jonathan, to get to net zero carbon energy will be about new technologies and it will be about innovation. And you can't plan 30 years of innovation and map it out, so that's the challenging thing in developing a strategy. One of the things we actually did through the development of the consultation was we did some work on a range of illustrative scenarios using a new energy transition model we developed, and what it showed that there's a range of different pathways you can take to get to that same goal. None of them are right and none of them are wrong, but it's to demonstrate how different the energy world of the future will be, and the fact that there is no single solution, I guess, to it all. I think what we're trying to do through the energy strategy is to set a clear vision and what we're trying to achieve. And if we're clear on that now, that helps to shape what we do as we go forward. So we've done that. We've outlined a proposed vision of net zero carbon and affordable energy, which we want everything to be shaped around, and supporting principles underneath that. So no matter what the technology is, no matter what the policy is, it should be aligned to achieving that. I think one thing we want to do through the strategy as well is realise that it's not about publishing it now and then that's it for the next 30 years. Actually, it needs to be a living, breathing document. It needs to be flexible, and it needs to be able to respond to those new technologies and innovation as they come forward. So that's, I think, how we're going to try and incorporate that. What I would say is, if you look through the consultation, hopefully what comes through is some of the things we want to focus on in the short to medium term. We've had real success in renewable electricity, and we know that we want to build on that over the next number of years, and it's really important to continue to develop that. And indeed, we've a proposed target of at least 70% of electricity consumption for renewables by 2030. We know that we want to invest in people's buildings and energy efficiency. We want people living in warmer, more energy efficient homes. And we also want to progress as many trials and demonstrators of these new technologies as possible to be at the forefront here in Northern Ireland.
And in terms of, again, reflecting on the level of engagement with industry, it has been significant. You go to any of these webinars at the minute and you're talking about hundreds of people signing on, but they do tend to be quite industry or business focused. From a consumer perspective, I read a bit of research recently that was done by, I think it was National Grid, and they surveyed a number of consumers with regards to decarbonisation, and it showed that around 25% of consumers, I think it was, had heard or was familiar with the term decarbonisation. So given that consumers are going to be key enablers for moving to a low carbon, net carbon zero economy, how does industry and the department work to get consumers more engaged in this wider conversation?
You're absolutely right. I think the future meeting decarbonised energy will require everyone to be on board with that. And I think when I look back at some of the success we've had, for example, in achieving almost 50% of our electricity from renewables, a lot of it has been from the industry and developers bringing forward projects, and actually we're going to be asking people to make decisions and to get involved in addressing climate change and decarbonising energy. So one of the things that we, I think, recognised very early on was we wanted to have a dedicated focus on consumers, and indeed the consultation we've put out has a principle of consumers at the centre of our energy future, and that's really, I suppose, the message for anyone involved in energy is consumers need to be at the centre of this, and how is what we're doing helping to benefit consumers. So we've got consumers there as a dedicated principle, and indeed we set up a dedicated working group trying to bring together stakeholder representatives to help to develop some of the policies and identify actually those areas that are most relevant for citizens and society out there more broadly. I think through the consultation itself, we tried to make it as appealing as possible, through graphics and just the way it's written, and indeed we supplemented it with a consumer-friendly version, just to make it a bit of an easier read for people. And indeed we also have published a monthly e-bulletin in a hopefully sort of user-accessible format to try and do that. But I mean, that's not going to do it alone in terms of getting people along with us on the road to decarbonised energy. So we're hoping through this consultation process to actually engage directly with consumers and test some of the policies with them that we think are going to most impact on them, to understand their perspectives, what they need to enable them to take advantage of the opportunities, but also to protect them. And indeed, one of the proposals we have in the consultation is around a new one-stop shop for energy in Northern Ireland, and I do think that could be a game changer. Having a focal point that all consumers can go to for information, advice and support of all types to help them through the energy transition, I think could be transformational.
No, I agree. I think that in some regards it nearly feels like it needs a David Attenborough moment in terms of, you look at where we are with recycling, and for many it just becomes second nature now, and nearly that sort of focus from consumers understanding what decarbonisation means for them and for future generations really needs to hit home harder. In terms of the options paper and looking at decarbonisation opportunities for heat specifically, your team refer on a number of occasions to biomethane injection, and for those not familiar with biomethane injection, it's ultimately converting organic waste into purposeful gas that can displace natural gas in the existing gas infrastructure. And for me, biomethane sort of strikes a chord in terms of the whole circular opportunity that comes with decarbonisation. You have a problem, slurry, manure, organic waste, and you turn that into a solution, which is displacing natural gas. Can you share your views or the department's views on why you see the likes of biomethane being an important starting point for decarbonisation of heat?
So in the consultation, I think we've been clear that decarbonising heat is probably the greatest challenge that we actually have here through the energy transition, and that whilst natural gas may still be a fossil fuel and may not be the end goal for where we want to be in 2050, actually the network and infrastructure we have here in Northern Ireland provides a real opportunity for decarbonised gas such as biogas. I think we have a real opportunity here as well in relation to biomethane and biogas from our agriculture base. We have a large agriculture sector here, and actually a real opportunity to turn what is a challenge, which is agricultural waste, into an opportunity and a benefit, and actually something that can really drive decarbonised heat in the future and decarbonised energy. And we have a track record. I mean, we've shown we can do this. We already produce significant amount of biogas, which is currently used for renewable electricity, and indeed has helped us to deliver on that target that we talked around renewable electricity consumption. So we have a lot of opportunities there. And we see biomethane injection and starting to look at how we can facilitate that into the gas grid as a really good starting point to do that. But we recognise we want to accompany that with demonstrators and trials and really understand how can that work, answer some of the economics of it, answer some of the technical questions, and answer some of those consumer questions as well.
Yeah, one of the key learnings for me, and a bit of a penny dropping moment, was the realisation that Northern Ireland, when it comes to decarbonisation, doesn't have to be a fast follower. They can be a pioneer. They can push on with new technologies that meet the wider energy landscape as it is. In terms of, you look at GB and there's energy clusters that look at being particularly compatible for blue hydrogen. You look at the Acorn project in Scotland, which is well positioned for carbon capture storage. What parts do you think specifically of Northern Ireland's landscape leave us well positioned to actually get a head start in some of these targets?
So, I mean, I think anything has to start by talking about our world-leading wind resources we have here in Northern Ireland that has been really central to meeting the previous renewable electricity target and the success we've had really in decarbonisation thus far. That's a fantastic resource to have as we look to decarbonise energy in the future. And it hasn't just about using the wind, but actually the engineering solutions we've shown through the grid to accommodate that renewables. It shows we can deliver. It shows when we need to deliver new technologies, new engineering solutions, we can do it in Northern Ireland. So that's a great base to work from on that. I also think that actually a lot of our sort of public sector organisations can help to drive some of these solutions as well. So, if I think about TransLink as a public transport operator, real opportunity there to start to look at some of these new low and zero emission vehicles coming through and trialling some of them. And indeed, they are trying out hydrogen buses. So we have an opportunity through public sector contracts to drive some of the activity that's needed in this space. Northern Ireland Water, again, a fantastic opportunity to trial things and to use low emission technologies through wastewater treatment works, for example, and in social housing as well. You look at the footprint that has and the opportunity that's there to improve the energy efficiency and to deploy new solutions in there. So we do have a really good reach into a lot of things. I've mentioned as well the size of our agriculture base and the modern gas network, which of course we can use to look into things like zero carbon gas. And I actually think more generally, as a point, we're small. We should be flexible. We should be able to get this done and work together to deliver what's needed for society and also for consumers in Northern Ireland.
In terms then of green hydrogen, so you touched upon the TransLink introduction of hydrogen fuel for their number of their bus fleet, but green hydrogen, specifically in the paper, called out that Northern Ireland is uniquely positioned to become a leader in the hydrogen economy and secure these benefits locally. What has to be done in the next number of years really to kickstart this? Because if you look at the European agenda in hydrogen, it does play a core part in decarbonisation roadmaps. What specifically do you think in Northern Ireland we have to do really to get a grasp of the opportunity that exists here?
So there's a lot of buzz and excitement about hydrogen. I think it's important, I guess, to say at the start, we're still relatively early days in the hydrogen development story. There's still a lot of work needed to understand the technologies, the economics, the markets, and where exactly it can apply and the solutions that it can be. But what is, I think, certain is the economic opportunity that there is around the hydrogen economy. You've mentioned it there. I mean, there are literally billions of pounds and euros going into developing hydrogen as a source across the UK, Europe, and indeed globally. And that's why our minister has come out and publicly stated on a number of occasions, actually last year in advance of the consultation being published, her vision for the hydrogen economy, and engage with a number of the key players who are looking to take forward potential projects here in Northern Ireland. So in the consultation, I mean, our approach to it really is framed around three different themes, if you will. I think the first of those is around producing hydrogen, and particularly green hydrogen, which you mentioned. I've talked about our success in renewable electricity, and that's where that comes from. The wind resources we have, the renewable electricity base, provides a real opportunity. Instead of turning off that wind whenever the grid can't take it, let's use it as a system service. Let's use it for electrolysis.
That's back to that circular argument again.
Exactly, yes. So real opportunities to produce green hydrogen in Northern Ireland. I think then understanding the various demand sources too, whether it's being used across heat or transport or industry or for power generation. We have a number of really interesting projects happening here in Northern Ireland. Our department funded Northern Ireland Water to trial a new commercial size electrolyser in its wastewater treatment works, and it's the first such project across the UK. It's looking to see how can we use the oxygen from an electrolyser to improve the efficiency of our wastewater treatment works, but that also produces hydrogen, which can be used to fuel buses or whatever it may be. We of course have TransLink trialling new hydrogen buses and putting them into operation. So we have a lot of momentum in this space, and it's about continuing to maintain that, looking for new projects and understanding what are the potential roles to deploy hydrogen as a demand source. And I think thirdly, and really importantly, is the supply chain side and the economic benefits side. I mean, we have a fantastic advanced manufacturing, materials and engineering base here in Northern Ireland. The innovation, the skills that we have here, we can use that to actually develop some of these technologies here in Northern Ireland and deliver some of the economic benefits that we want to see from this too.
In terms of wider societal issues, I can't think of many projects that span right across so many different departments within our executive. You, of course, represent the Department for Economy, but we have in this conversation today talked about agriculture, we've talked about the need for new infrastructure, we've talked about the role of consumers. So what are the department doing to ensure that all the relevant stakeholders across government are involved in this wider energy Department for Economy strategy?
So the Department for the Economy is leading on the development of a new energy strategy, but I think it's important to say it's not the Department for the Economy strategy. It's not even the executive strategy, it's Northern Ireland's strategy. And I think it's really, really important that we take a cohesive, collaborative and joined up approach across government, central government and local government as we do that. And that's been our approach in this, is bringing together everyone who has a role in developing, delivering energy policy in any way as part of the process in developing the energy strategy. We have a government stakeholders group formally that's part of the structures developing the strategy, and it brings together every department with a remit in energy policy to make sure that all the work's aligned on that. The working groups that we've set up for the energy strategy to look at policy options, they involve the relevant representatives from central government, every department, but also local government on every single one to make sure that all the relevant issues and remits are covered within that. And I think, I'd like the consultation to speak for itself. If you read that, it covers the full breadth of energy policy across government in Northern Ireland. There isn't anything left out of it. And so I think that should hopefully demonstrate what we're trying to do here in developing Northern Ireland's new energy strategy. It's important to say that it's not just about the strategy, though. It's actually about delivery, and we want to make sure we maintain those relationships and maintain that collaborative approach as we develop and deliver policy going forward from the strategy.
We're going to finish on this point, Thomas. We had talked earlier about the end goal of what 2050 looks like, but I suppose in many ways even more challenging is, what does the immediate 2 or 3 year period ahead look like in terms of success? How will we get a feel and a grasp of the momentum starting to take place and us starting this roadmap in earnest? What does success for you look like in the early stages of the new energy strategy?
So, government's good at strategy. We need to be good at delivery as well. In fact, we all need to be good at delivery here, involved in this space, and have a role to play in our energy future. When I look to this year, I really want to have that clear plan and vision in place about what we're trying to achieve, and I think everything stems from that, but not let that hold us back. So one of the things we want to do is, as we produce the new strategy later in the year, is also accompany that with a delivery plan, an action plan, to actually turn that into tangible actions that we're going to take forward over the next number of years, supplemented really by regular monitoring of a strategy to make sure that we're on track and delivering what we need to. But we want to see things on the ground. I've mentioned about the Northern Ireland water electrolyser. That is something you can physically go and see, that we've already done before a strategy is in place. You can see hydrogen buses on the road, as we do these things. You can see wind turbines and anaerobic digesters and all these various different things, and that's what we need to start seeing. So, we want to see more renewable and low carbon technologies, coming forward and continuing to come forward. We want to see our houses being upgraded. We want to see warmer, more efficient homes. And indeed, some of these really interesting trials and demonstrators that we're interested in, we want to see them on the ground and showing how Northern Ireland can be at the forefront of some of these new technologies.